Welcome to Shield Maidens, Women of the Norse World, the podcast that celebrates the remarkable women of the Viking Age. From fierce warriors and powerful queens to wise seers and cunning goddesses, these women left an indelible mark on history. Join authors Johanna Wittenberg and K.S. Barton each month as we explore the stories, achievements, and impact of Norse women. Welcome to Shield Maidens, Women of the Norse World. This is episode 35, in which Johanna and I welcome historian Irina Manea to talk about sorceresses and monstrous and undead women from saga literature. I'm K.S. Barton, author of the Norse family trilogy, in which a young Viking woman and a Viking warrior are caught in a deadly blood feud between two brothers. And with me is Johanna Wittenberg. Hi, Johanna.
Hello, how are you?
I'm great.
Good. I'm Johanna Wittenberg, author of the Norse Women series, which is the story of Queen Osa. She was a real Norse queen who ruled alone in the early 9th century.
And with us today is Irina Manea. She is a historian of the Viking Age with a PhD from the University of Bucharest. She wrote her PhD thesis on Norse myth and its reception in metal music, but now her main interests lie in cultural history, magic and mentalities, the supernatural, and the universe of the Icelandic sagas. She is a public historian with a YouTube channel, Skuld, and the handle is at Shield of Skuld, and she's an active presence on Substack. I follow her there. Her research interests are religion, memory studies, death and burial, and pagan reception in Norse literature. Welcome, Irina.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, thank you for coming.
Wonderful to be here. Thank you.
So I have to tell you, I just started watching your new video about the Norse mythology and metal. So it's right up my alley. I love that stuff.
The sort of interest that kind of revived. Some people have invited me to certain events to talk about that.
Really?
I'm actually going to publish a revised version of my PhD thesis.
Nice.
Hopefully next year, at the beginning of next year. So I didn't think I'm going to revive that, but apparently I do revive a lot of things. Probably has to do with my interest in revenants as well.
Yeah.
I was also out of academia for a couple of years, and now I'm back. So yeah, I'm sort of a revenant myself. So I think that explains a lot. That's kind of like a link between all of these aspects.
Well, hey, it's good to revive that older stuff that you've done, and that there's still an interest. I remember the first time I discovered like that kind of link between it. It must have been like 15 years ago, and I discovered the band Tyr, and it was a song called Hold Your Heathen Hammer High, I think was the name of the song. And I remember thinking,
exactly.
oh my gosh,
I used it on the thumbnail of the video actually.
Oh,
yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, so I think Johanna had something more
Yeah, well, I was just going to say
contemporary.
You mentioned to me that you recently presented a paper on undead women at the Saga conference in Krakow. So it would be great if you would tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, in Katowice actually. That was in August, and that was an interest of mine stemming from the fact that I have been doing some reading regarding revenants and burial mounds, and I figured that women are not really that present in this story. I mean, we do have a lot of examples of aggressive revenants or people breaking into mounds to search for treasure or to obtain status and so on, but they're usually male. They're not really female. So I tried to investigate a little bit if females are present in this sort of typology at all, and how we can interpret them. And to my dismay, I only discovered a couple of characters, not so many of them. But I think that in itself might be an interesting point as to why they are so underrepresented. But at any rate, regardless of male and female, the whole story with the revenants, I think it has a theoretical grounding in what we call monster theory. Monster theory in the medieval world, especially here. I'm referring mainly to Jeffrey Jerome Cohen's Seven Theses, but also to deformed discourses written by David Williams, for example. So the main point here would be that the monster is not just a marginal curiosity, but a central cultural signifier, like some sort of mode of discourse through which medieval society might articulate stuff like fear, ideology, ideological boundaries, metaphysical concerns. So it's really a very complex figure, and it stands at the border between the possible and the impossible, between what we can imagine and what we know to be untrue. So the way these authors define monsters is rather from a semiotic point of view. So as Williams called them, semiotic excess. And this is very interesting for the women characters because we have different types of excesses here that overlap. Because female revenants, they are not only marginal figures or borderline figures because they're revenants, so between life and death, but also because they're women. So a woman in the Middle Ages was a monster, but a monster in the sense that they were like in between. They were not males, but at the same time they were part of this world. So this sort of framework would help us understand a little bit how these monsters can function. And yeah, they signify different things. They can signify distortion, they can signify paradox, they can also signify God's symbolic universe, for example. We have the character of Thorgunna. If you want, I can talk a little bit about her because she is actually the most comprehensive description of a female revenant from Icelandic literature. We do have a few more examples from the Vinland sagas, but Thorgunna is our main character here.
Great.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we should
Yeah,
talk
We
about
always
absolutely.
love hearing about her.
Yeah, Eyrbyggja saga is always an interesting saga. I mean, it's one of my favorite sagas. It has so many supernatural elements, and yeah, to my mind, it manages to like reach this sort of like balance between the whole feuding problematics and the paranormal. So it is to say here that she's not the only revenant in Eyrbyggja saga. There are a lot of revenants in this saga. Um, and she is interesting because she's not really presented as an aggressive character because there is sometimes this tendency we find in the sagas to, it's not really deterministic, but it's more like tendencies of characters who may become revenants in the sense that they are aggressive before turning undead. It's not the case of Thorgunna. She's not really presented as being from outside the system from that point of view. I mean, she's not someone who's trying to evade the laws of compromise and arbitration specific to Iceland, which is something we sometimes see in the men who turn into revenants, but she is being othered in different ways. So first of all, she is othered in terms of her origin, as it is specified that she is from the Hebrides. So she is not really part of this society in a way. And she also seems to possess some very precious stuff. So when she moves to Iceland, she comes with English sheets. She has a silk-covered quilt. She has bed curtains, also very precious, and a canopy. So, and it is described in the saga that all these things were so precious that nobody had ever seen such things. And I think that's an interesting element because these material treasures are going to play a part in her becoming. One more thing is the way she's being described. So she is again presented as a bit different through some physical characteristics. For example, she is described as being very tall, very stout, a woman of great stature, very fleshy with dark brows, so almost like a man, which should be a question mark here. She's not like a woman, she's rather like a man. Also very hairy, which is again some kind of stereotype that we find sometimes when we're trying to draw this difference between the acceptable woman in the Icelandic saga and something that you should regard as different or at least problematic. These are the physical characteristics. But her character is also a bit strange in the sense that it is said that she does come to church. So she is, in the sense, different from the normal revenant we would have in the Icelandic saga, which is usually a pagan or some sort of character who doesn't really respect the accepted Christian traditions in Iceland. So she is proper in her behavior, in her religious behavior from this point of view. What differentiates her is the fact that she seems to be more like an introvert. So she doesn't really talk, she doesn't really engage with other people. She's not really sociable, and seems to be a bit of a problem. And the third thing, which I think the Icelandic author found problematic with regard to Thorgunna, is the fact that she takes a fancy to the boy of the household where she resides. The boy is called Kjartan. It's not explicitly told in the saga that this would be a sexual attraction, but it's kind of like implicit. The sagas never tell us like directly that sort of thing, but it's kind of implied because the boy himself is described as, yeah, he's very young. He's like 14 or 13. I don't remember exactly, but he's as strong as a man. I mean, he's very manly. This is something we should remember. So to me, it's clear that the author does have a problem with that. So he wants to make a problem out of this fact. Yeah, it's what's interesting about Thorgunna is the way she dies, which speaking of metal music and so on, it's very interesting because it is described that she dies following a rain of blood, like in the Slayer song. Yeah. So there are a couple of omens that she interprets herself. And what's also interesting is that she leaves precise instructions to the people as to what they're supposed to do with her body. And the instruction is for her bed clothing to be burnt. And secondly, she wants to be buried at a place she prophesizes to become very important in the Christian history of Iceland. And this is actually the case. We're talking here about the bishopric at Skolholt. So she prophesizes that this is going to become very important. And the people actually try to comply. So her corpse is taken. It's moved away. Is carried for a very long distance. But then at some point, people get tired and they want to take a break. And of course, they need to go to a farm and they have to ask for hospitality as you would normally do when confronted with bad weather or exhaustion and so on. So they reach this farm, and the farmer, he does offer shelter. So he does, in a way, meet expectations, but at the same time, he doesn't because he does not offer them food, which was, again, something essential. And what happens is that at this point, when the bearers of the corpse are confronted with this unpleasant situation, Thorgunna rises. She rises from the dead. But she doesn't rise from the dead to attack anyone. She doesn't want to disturb. On the contrary, she rises in order to prepare food. So the people, they start hearing like this sort of disturbing noise. They go to check out what it was. And when they come to the pantry, they see this woman. She's described as being larger than usual. And she's also described as being naked. Now, nakedness is also a sort of marker for otherness in the sense that seeing an old woman who is naked, yeah, let's just say that it would have provoked some sort of unpleasant thoughts on the one hand. But I think we can also interpret it from a more Christian point of view in the sense that she's naked because back in the day, people weren't really buried in their clothes anymore. So we're talking, let's say, around the year 1000, maybe 11th century, and so on. So she would have been just in her shroud. So two ways of interpreting it, either a Christian way or a more sexualized way. Yeah, the aging body of a woman who which might cause a little bit of a trouble in perceiving her, in observing her. And she engages in food preparation. Those who see her are obviously very terrified because she's undead, and they don't really approach her. They just let her do her thing. And then the farmer, he sort of like learns his lesson and then also prepares food after she carries food herself in the hall and sets the table and lays out the meal. So in this particular episode, I think we're dealing with a moral lesson. Like this woman comes back from the dead to ensure that the rules and regulations of society back then are really followed, and that these people are well fed. This is not the only episode when she appears, though. The subsequent apparitions of Thorgunna are linked to what is known in the saga as the miracles of Froda, or the wonders of Froda. And they involve Thorgunna appearing as a seal, which is also something interesting because it does tend to have a little bit of sexual connotation as well, but also some kind of monstrous connotation. There is another saga called the saga of the Bishop of Gudmund, where we again have a character who seems to return as a seal. And she is linked to an episode of drowning. There is a company of men who drown in the sea, and they come back to this farm where Thorgunna used to work. And yeah, they terrorize the population there, the remaining population, in the sense that they refuse to leave. So here you have a case where you have like a company of the undead coming to occupy the space of the living. So it's difficult to harmonize these two worlds because it disrupts essentially the boundary between life and death and presence and absence. And we can also say that it involves sort of like an existential tension. So before that, we had a theological tension, and now I think we have an existential tension, an existential threat. And the saga makes it implicit that the fact that these people returned from the dead has to do with the unfulfillment of her wish of having the bed clothing burnt, because the lady of the house turned out to be very greedy, and she decided to keep all that stuff, although the instruction was clearly to burn them. And so the household now has to be confronted with the situation of sharing their living quarters with the undead. So Thorgunna is not really what you might call a demon or anything related to that, or some sort of punishment. I think we should rather interpret her as a manifestation of imbalance, as a sort of spiritual remainder. And her presence essentially confronts the living with something that is outside of their depth, something that is outside of their discourse, like the afterlife or divine justice, social piety, and so on. And as interpreted in an article written by Kirsi Kanerva, this is also a good opportunity for Kjartan, so the boy of the house I mentioned earlier, to let's say find his place in society, because he is the illegitimate son. So he's not the son of the man in this farm where Thorgunna works. He's a child his wife has with someone else. So he's not really accepted in society either. But because he has the courage to confront all these undead, and Thorgunna included, he receives essentially a chance to become integrated in the family, a chance which he manages to take because he collaborates with an important person in the community, his uncle Snorri Gothi, so the local chieftain, and they organize a door court, which is also interesting in itself. So essentially, they gather all these undead at a door, and they tell them that this is not their world, they do not belong to this world, and they need to vanish. So using the legalistic argument, they manage to banish the undead. And regarding Thorgunna, they eventually burn her belongings and manage to get rid of her as well. So we do have an episode of a haunting, which is similar to other episodes we encounter in the saga, in the sense that we have disruption. We also have some illness, and we also have causing the death of the others, and so well, and so on, and ultimately a type of exorcism of some sort. So in a way, Thorgunna is a woman who continues to exert a form of agency even after her death, a sort of ritual agency. And I think because she comes back, and because of her age as well, because of that link of causation with the other undead and her problematic relationship with Kjartan, the boy, um, she doesn't really fulfill expectations on the one hand, the social expectations, but on the other hand, she does help fulfill some of the expectations, like especially the religious ones. If we go back to the episode of the meal before, so she is present, but she's also absent. She's living and she's dead at the same time. And this is actually at the core of this monstrous semiotics, the fact that she is always playing with these boundaries and confronting us with our own definition of what means to be a woman, what means to be dead or alive, what means to be aging, and so on. So in this sense, she is grotesque, but the grotesque in the sense that she signifies too much, perhaps. So monstrous in the sense that she overwhelms our systems of understanding. I also think that she incorporates very well these tensions in society, between paganism and Christianity, between the body that is corrupted and the soul who still remains in one way or another. And also between the sort of like supernatural intrusion on the one hand, and on the other hand, gendered authority, because yeah, the way she acts is not really something that you would expect from a woman in her stance. So basically, yeah, that would be her story and potential interpretation.
I always thought that my own grandmother would do exactly the same thing if, as far as getting up from her deathbed and preparing food to make sure that the social
Right.
conventions were obeyed.
Yep. Yeah, it's really a
So,
case of excessive materiality here, but in this time it is used in order um, to convey this message that you have to hold on to the rituals one way or another.
so
Well,
why do
and
you think that the women come back in a way that's not, well, I mean, other than maybe obvious reasons, in a way that's not threatening? But when the men come back, they're usually just awful. Like everybody wants to kill them. They kill the livestock, they kill the servants, they kill everyone. And yet when the woman comes back, she's fixing food, or the ones in the Vinland sagas, don't they come back just to basically say you need to go for, to prophesize? They don't
Mm,
hurt anybody, I don't think.
Mm, they don't hurt anybody, but they also have this sort of monstrosity expressed differently through problematic sexuality, because
Mm,
Sigrid slash Grimhild is basically the same character. In one of the episodes, she is essentially trying to get a partner for the afterlife, and she goes under the bed sheets of one of these men in the saga. And he does have to kill her using an axe because
mm,
he perceives he perceives her very threatening. So yeah, it's just a monstrosity expressed differently. It's not the
hmm
aggression that you find in the character of Lamefoot in Edbiga Saga, for example, is perhaps the most aggressive revenant you can think of. Thought of Lamefoot in Edbiga Saga, but they are still problematic characters, and the fact that they are women, I think, augments a little bit the problem of interpreting them. Yeah, also with regard to this tension between heathenry and Christianity. The character of Sigrid, for example, is explicitly identified as a heathen woman in the Vinland
Mm.
sagas, unlike Thorgunna. So it's also an occasion to make a sort of like a comment on the whole situation that was going on in Iceland. So in Grænlendinga Saga, for example, it is stated that when this happens, the Revenant episode, Christianity is still young in Greenland, and yeah, these people they professed a different belief. And also the episodes with the plague, I think, are relevant in order
Mm.
to underline the social and religious tension. But yeah, Sigrid as well is described as manly. By the way, she is described
Mm.
as extremely big and strong as men. So again, we can see that the author is still trying to make this sort of differentiation. So maybe this manly physique is a precondition, possible precondition for a woman in the sagas to become a revenant. So yeah, in Grænlendinga Saga, she only returns to feel her feet, which is an interesting episode, and to feel her shoes. But in the saga of Eric the Red, here she returns due to an erotic, potentially erotic motivation. So again, it's something implicit, not explicit in the saga. She crawls into the bed of a character who is himself dying, by the way, because of the plague. But yeah, when only gets one shot, and
She's lonely.
yeah, yeah, and she wants perhaps a partner for the afterlife, essentially. Yeah, and she climbs into to the bed frame, but then yeah, the character he's not Thorstein Eriksson. He's not really that thrilled about it, so he grabs an axe and places her against her chest. Quite a contradictory presence. I mean, yeah, I think it's again a commentary on the topics of religion and transcendence, salvation. Uh, but then again, the saga doesn't really makes it very explicit why the character comes back. You don't really get the impression that she has a lot of agency either, in the sense that in Grönlandiga Saga, for example, she doesn't really utter a word. She doesn't say anything, so she is without speech, and her actions are also quite ambiguous. Like at one point, she's reaching for her shoes. Then she, yeah, crawling into bed, collapsing, and being struck
Hmm.
violently down with an axe. So it is definitely an anomaly here, which is why I think we can interpret it in a way as a form of deformed discourse about the afterlife. She signifies essentially a disturbance maybe in the social order, a disturbance in the spiritual order, as she's very hard to classify. And yeah, her posthumous behavior really requires some action from from the exterior in order to underscore and eliminate the threat ultimately.
Wow. So there's so much to think about.
I know.
Yeah, they have very problematic bodies, I think. And that if you read the description, I think that their bodies are really a problem here. Like people feeling uneasy, also maybe a little about the body, especially the aging body of a woman, which
Mm.
is why they're trying to like frame them in this more undead slash monstrous way
And it's
of the
interesting that
gendered
the
grotesque.
woman who was the pagan is the one who comes back with the sexual appetite that speaks
Thorgina
a
has some sexual appetite of herself. It's just not not made that
no,
clear.
yeah.
Yeah.
It kind of for me it kind of shows how the Christian authors might have felt about the pagan woman.
Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And the undead are not the only cases. I mean, we have other kinds of trolls in the sagas that also display this sort of behavior. Again, in Elbigja Saga, we have Katla, who is how to put it? Um, yeah, magically riding Gunnlaug, was, who was this young man in search of lessons in sorcery. and Katla is one of the sorceresses who woos him, more or less, tries to persuade him to spend more time with her, way to put it. And she essentially causes him a great deal of harm because she attacks him one night, and he appears the next morning with broken bones. He has to spend one full winter trying to recover, and for the whole community, it is quite clear that one of the two sorceresses, Ogeir and Katla, did that. But unfortunately, the other sorceress, the innocent one, is accused. So until they get to the bottom of it, some time passes. There's also conflict, pretty bad one in the community, with injuries, feud, and so on. But then Katla is ultimately discovered as being the culprit, and it's also very interesting the way she is dealt with, because in order for her magic to stop working, they place a bag over her head. So different tactics to deal with that sort of character.
Don't they also put rocks on top of her after they kill her? Oh,
Yeah, that is.
Was that a different
I don't remember
sorceress?
if that was Katla in particular, but that is a way of dealing with the undead. Certainly is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there are
We have
quite
a
a
couple of
few, there are some
archaeological.
burials. There are
Yeah,
some
yeah. We have a couple of
burials that have that.
archaeological examples as well. And it's really difficult to interpret them. But I think there is one example of a double burial which parallels quite a lot the case of Katla and her son, because her son was also involved in all kinds of magical stuff. I mean, Katla is the one defending him. He turns him into a distaff at some point, which is also very interesting, as a distaff is also something that we find quite often in the archaeological record. But yeah, there is a double burial where we find two people and their mother and son, and she is covered with stones and he is hanged. And this is exactly what happens to these people in Erbygja saga. So maybe it was a case here of them being engaged in a similar magical act, like in the sagas, or maybe we're dealing with something different. It's always a little bit difficult of drawing these kind of parallels between the sagas and archaeology, because we risk getting ourselves into a circular argument. I mean, we look in archaeology for stuff that is represented in the sagas, and that can cause a little bit of trouble.
In what way?
In the sense that we're looking for confirmation for the episodes that we encounter in the sagas. And perhaps there could be different ways of interpreting these burials, so not necessarily sorcerer burials, although that would be, so to speak, the contemporary representation, the contemporary interpretation of such graves, especially graves that contain stuff like rods or distaffs or all sorts of objects that are considered deviant or a bit anomalous for the archaeological record. But for some of these archaeological sites, I do believe that the term sorcerer's grave is an appropriate one, at least yeah, given our current state of research, especially concerning, for example, the grave in Fyrket in Denmark, so Fyrket 4, perhaps the most famous ones. And then we also have the double burials in Birka, so some examples in from Norway as well, and yeah, the
Let's describe a few of those burials. They're very interesting.
yeah. I think the Fyrket one is the most interesting one, don't you think?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, the Fyrket burial definitely contains a lot of objects that would place this person in the category of sorceress, and recent analysis has also been done on the textiles we find in this grave, which also seems to corroborate the other pieces of evidence that we have regarding her status, at least. So, okay, sorceress, maybe not 100%, but at any rate, she was someone very, very important in the community. But yeah, the objects that were found also speak for yeah, maybe an engagement in some sort of yeah, ritual or performative um, sort of activity. She has a copper alloy bowl that comes from Iran, for example. There's also a beaker-shaped copper object. What else does she have? She has, I think, two whetstones. One of them is quite long and quite difficult to interpret. There are some glass beads as well. She has a chair pendant, which is very interesting. These pop up quite a lot. She has toe rings. Again, very interesting touch. Um, a bird's feet pendant, which seems to be of Slavic origin, although they're also encountered on sites such as Hedeby. So there might have been some sort of network of distribution. Yeah, these objects could be considered in a way, yeah, in a certain way, pagan, definitely, especially if we look at the context, at the period of the burial, because Firket, yeah, this was one of the fortresses that popped up in the 10th century. So most likely at the initiative of Harold Bluetooth. Um, and Harold Bluetooth is the one credited with the Christianization of Denmark. I mean, he might not have Christianized like everyone or the whole of Denmark as we imagine it nowadays, but he definitely played a very important part in it. So in a way that speaks for I think a certain amount of religious tolerance, if I might use that term, used in this case. And what's interesting about her is the fact that a part of her brooch, she has one of those magnificent Gotlandic box-shaped brooches in the grave. Like a part of that brooch was discovered in another one of these fortresses by Harold Bluetooth in the Borgring, which was actually recently excavated. So she might have actually been one of those traveling prophetesses, those traveling sorceresses we find out a lot about in the saga of Eric the Red. For example, the saga of Eric the Red, which is very, very descriptive. There's also been some criticism precisely because it is so well detailed and so well described and detailed. And as a question mark here, like how many of these details are really accurate and how much did the author actually make up? Well, if we look at the Firket burial, we are going to find parallels. We are going to find parallels in the pendants and also in the pouch that she carries. And
the staff also, right?
the staff,
Staff.
yeah. And this copper object I mentioned earlier, which has the shape of a beaker, has also been reinterpreted recently, and apparently it seems to be the end mount of the staff, or at least, yeah, that would be
like
the most recent interpretation. Yeah, exactly. And
didn't she also have like seeds and stuff in her pouch?
yeah, exactly.
Was she the one who had cannabis seeds in her pouch, or was that
henbane.
someone else?
She had henbane.
Henbane, yeah, it's the one with the henbane.
Because I know
Yeah.
somebody had cannabis as well, and I was
That
like,
was the Osberg. Sure.
That was the
okay.
Osterberg one. Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
that is correct. That is correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of these objects also seem to be very shiny as well. So if we look at the textiles, at the fragments, like mineralized textiles that we find in the grave, there's silver thread, for example, there's golden thread, like these triangles that she appears to have on her chest, like all these bits and pieces of evidence of shiny stuff, ranging from textiles to the objects she uses. She might have actually used them as props in a ritual performance. Because I think they've also made a reconstruction of that hall, and it would have been under the correct circumstances, appropriate circumstances, it would have been like very, very bright, and it would have allowed her to like really present herself as a ritual specialist and show off the status that she had, like communicate this sort of identity and the role, the spiritual role that she would have had in the community. Yeah. And speaking of henbane, I think she also had some other substances. I think lead if I'm not
Yes.
mistaken, was in the Gotlandic brooch. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So yeah, maybe she also wore some kind of makeup. I mean, we do have some
Mm.
evidence from Arabic authors. I think Ibn Tartushi, if I'm not mistaken, also describes the usage of that sort of makeup with the people who are living in Haitabo in Hedebu, for example. So that I don't think that's far-fetched at all to imagine her like this ritual specialist or at least a person very high up in the higher echelons of society who would have also engaged in that sort of activity, definitely.
Hmm. So
It's
did
really
sorceresses
fascinating.
mostly come from the upper classes? Because she was well, if she was really important, and the in Eric the Red saga, she's clearly really important. Do they come from the upper classes, or do they become that after they become a sorceress?
Good question.
Yeah, that's really a good question. I don't know. I suppose in order to be able to have access to that sort of magical knowledge, I think you would need to have some sort of access to the elite of the society, I suppose. I
Mm.
mean, you would have to have the resources necessary to engage in that sort of activity. And if we look at the whole archaeological assemblage, especially in Furkat 4, it's a lot of exotic elements there. And that kind of exotic assemblage that really shows that she was someone really well connected. So I'm not
Mm.
really sure that if you were a commoner, you would be able to achieve that sort of networking in order to get access to stuff that's coming from the Mediterranean or from Iran or from all kinds of places that were, I mean, in trading towns, they wouldn't have been that unusual, but generally speaking, that they would have been on a local level, more or less unusual. So the fact that we are finding this amount of exotic material, I think, is in itself an argument for the fact that she was someone who was well connected and had access to that sort of resources, both material and regarding access to knowledge, generally speaking. Yeah.
Well, and how did
Yeah,
she
that's a good
learn? How
point.
did she gain this knowledge? That's a good question as well.
Yep. Yeah, it is.
Well, they don't tell us that, nor do they
No,
in
they
They
Eric
don't
the
tell
Red
don't.
us
saga.
They
directly,
They
really
no.
don't.
No, no. But yeah, I think that might be actually an older tradition. I mean, it's always problematic when we're trying to like compare the Viking Age with older ages like the Iron Age or the Bronze Age, but we do have examples from other time periods as well. So yeah, we might have to do with a longer tradition. Like for example, there are two um I know of two graves from the Bronze Age. One of them is a man and the other one is a woman. So we have the Videgård, the Seid Mother, so the magician from Videgård. And he's very interesting because he also has a belt purse with
Hmm.
some stuff in it. Um, I don't think he has that amount of precious objects he does not have, but he has stuff like the tail, no, the talon of a hawk, for
Mm.
example, a snake tail or something like that. Either way, he has objects that also point into that direction, some sort of magical and shamanistic preoccupations. And there is also a grave in Malehøj, also in Denmark, from I think 1100 more or less BC. Again, a bronze belt box with bones of all kinds of animals, also pointing into this direction of some sort of preoccupation with the supernatural or attempting to draw such connections. And yeah, in the Iron Age, we do have both in the Nordic and in the Roman Iron Age, we have some elements, some references by Roman and Greek authors to characters who might classify as Volur. For example, we have Veleda, probably the best example, most well known
Hmm.
of the Bructeri. Then I think we have also from The Semnones, Ganna, was theorized that she might have something to do with the term Gandr, which is another term for magic besides Seidr. Gandr and Galder might have had something to do with the practical side of magic in the sense of chanting, for example, which was something that terrified Christian authors. As a matter of fact, they refuse to talk about that. They refuse to talk about ritual, and that is very irritating. But we do know
Yeah,
that
that's
they did
frustrating, especially
engage
with
in,
like
yeah,
Eric.
yeah, yeah,
And we do
They'd
exactly.
have
say
the
everything
Galdra
except what
book.
she actually
Not
said.
only
Like,
Eric the Red, yeah, not only Eric the Red. Adam of Bremen also tells something in that line, like what these people were chanting is so terrible it cannot be uttered.
Yeah.
yeah.
Like, okay, Adam, please try. I really want to know, but no, no, they do
Well, I
not
wonder
want.
if
They refuse.
some of it we don't know, not necessarily because of the Christian authors later, but because it was a woman's thing, right? So maybe it was passed down from woman to woman, from, the some woman elder in the community to the other women to their daughters, and the people who were writing it down later were mostly men, and maybe they didn't even have access to that information.
Yeah, it's difficult to tell, but what's interesting is that also men were also engaged in that sort of activity.
That's true.
Um, yeah, yeah. There are some scholars who theorize that it was actually an activity that was sort of like the domain of women at the beginning, and men start getting involved in it a little later, like in the early Middle Ages, not before. Yeah, this might have to do with the attempt at a masculinization of these spaces, of these feminine spaces, perhaps. So an attempt from the men to like occupy places that were and roles that were traditionally associated with women. But then again, yeah, we have an example such as this man from Videgård from the Bronze Age, who clearly seems to be some sort of shamanistic figure. I'm not sure if he was a shaman, but what he has in his grave points into that direction, which suggests that maybe men, or at least some of the men, would have also had to do with this. Let's call it area of study, even as early as the women. Yeah.
Well, and in the Sami culture, they had
Right.
male
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
they had male practitioners,
Yeah.
and we know
Definitely.
there was a lot of crossover between Scandinavian and Sami magic. They learned from each other.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, there is definitely a strong influence here, and also the one of the graves in Birka, one of the double graves in Birka, just popped into my mind. There was that double burial where we have these two people who are sitting on top of each other, woman and the man,
Hmm.
and they're also um, there are also graves where it's not really that clear why artifacts generally associated with men are placed near the woman and the other way round. So we might have some sort of yeah, maybe not only cross-dressing, but just this sort of mixture between social expectations, which I think fits this whole image of magic, because magic is also in a way monstrous, and monstrous in the sense that it's a liminal space. It's a space that allows you to like play with boundaries, right? Try to overcome them and try to be something else. And what we find in Old Norse literature, which is the ergi factor, so to speak,
Hmm.
like this tendency to call sorcerers effeminate. So in that line, it doesn't seem to be something that prevents men from engaging in that sort of activity, and it's not always seen as something terribly negative. We have a lot of examples of sorcerers who yeah have a deep narrative role. Vivil, for example, in the saga of Rolf Kraki, who helps the characters. So they're not always associated with that sort of negativity, although there seems to be this aura of unmanliness or sexual deviance, or at any rate something that's not really expected from you. On the other hand, if you think of it, Odin was also sort of like that. So maybe if you do that, you're like emulating Odin, and yeah, in the end, that can be accepted and can be forgiven.
Didn't
I
Harold
wonder which came.
Finehair actually put one of his sons to death for that reason?
Yeah,
Uh,
correct.
they chain them at him and his followers at high tide or low tide and wait for the tide to come in, and they were executed that way, and it was for practicing the
For practicing
witchcraft and
sadism.
for
Yep, yep,
ergi.
true.
So, but
Exactly.
that was one example. Yeah, it's very interesting. We've been talking to a few people about the more gender fluidity that may have
Exactly.
existed during Viking Age and less rigid, because later with Christianization, they became more
Mm.
rigid. Cross-dressing was outlawed, which makes you wonder if maybe cross-dressing and some of the other gender fluidity was actually accepted during pagan times.
Yeah, at any rate, this is something that we find in the law codes, in the Grey Goose Law, for example, as again 13th century. So yeah, we definitely have some laws that would have been older than the Grogos, but it's really difficult to say if that's something that we would have found in pagan times as well. And yeah, we also have some characters from mythology, such as Loki. That Loki is the ultimate like deviant character, I think, in all of Norse mythology. I mean, he is not only he's not only overcoming the boundaries between male and female, but also between human and non-human, So he is, in the sense, very much the ultimate symbol of that sort of mixture, and just driving the monstrous to the extreme, in the sense of, well, yeah, testing the boundaries of what is possible.
Well, he was a
And yet,
Jotun,
in
but
the
he was
yeah,
accepted as part of the Aesir as Odin's blood brother.
Exactly. Yep.
so he was an outsider too.
He was very
Yeah,
much so.
Until he was not.
yeah. Well,
Yep.
then he behaved so badly in the Lokasenna, like slut shaming all the
Yeah.
women and everything. And it's like, well, you turned into a horse, and
Yeah,
so
you
who
have no
are
room to talk.
you, right? Who are you
Yeah.
to judge
Yeah.
who Freya sleeps
Exactly. Yeah.
with?
Yeah. Yeah. And Odin, you don't want me to start telling on you what we did on Samsø at that time. Yeah, that would have been a very fun poem to recite.
Yeah.
I think it would have been probably recited, played. Why not?
But so
Yeah,
much
yeah.
of it was all verbal. It wasn't written down until, till after the Christian era. So that's one of the reasons so much of this information we just don't have.
Exactly. Yeah.
Or we have to take with a huge grain of salt. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not to be dismissed completely. I mean, yeah, since we talked about the saga of Eric the Red and this very lengthy description of the sorceress, it helps us a lot to, on the one hand, understand what people in the Middle Ages were thinking of their pagan ancestors and how they were trying to integrate them into their world. And this is also the case of the Revenants, because yeah, many of the Revenants are also um, from the pagan world, or at least paganized in some way.
Mm.
And yeah, on the other hand, they're also useful if you like try to surgically remove the parts that you might corroborate with other type of archaeological or anthropological evidence, in order to shape a more valuable interpretation.
But we have also graves in which the people were decapitated. And there seems to be pig jaw bones that are used in some of these graves that are suspiciously magical, maybe as a preventative, a way of preventing the person from rising from the dead. I know decapitation is mentioned as one way that you can overcome a revenant.
Yeah,
In
with one exception, there is a guy called Clovis, who takes his head and fights with his head in his hand, which I've always found an incredible image.
Yes.
Yes, as someone who just refuses to go away.
No matter what.
Well, didn't they
Um,
also sometimes put the head like between their legs or like by their butts or something like
yeah,
that?
by
Hmm.
the
It's just
butt.
to,
Yeah, yeah, that's a reference from Grettis saga. Yeah,
okay, that's
indeed.
right. Yeah.
That's very difficult to interpret, actually.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It might have something to do. This is an idea put forth by Neil Price in his book The Viking Way. The idea that the orifices might have had something to do with allowing the spirits called the Gundyr like go through you when you are involved in some sort of magical activity. So that was really a way to prevent them from possessing you
Yeah,
and endowing you with
Ibn
life, for example. Yeah.
Ibn Fadlan's narrative where the
Yep.
a relative is lighting the funeral pyre and he covers his anus while he's
Yep.
doing that.
Yeah. Also goes backwards. Yeah. That's also a very interesting description
Hmm.
with all kinds of elements. He probably didn't understand what was happening.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really nice
Clearly.
that he recorded that. So we can think about the sort of deviant behavior that he might have witnessed.
One hopes.
Yeah.
Well, we also have the of course the Oseberg burial, which is another one in which there's a lot of evidence that it seems like it may have been at least partly a sorceress's grave as well. And that's where the cannabis was found. And also the chair. So that was something you mentioned earlier about the charm of the chair. There's quite a few charms, little silver or metal charms that are the images of a chair. And there's um, a a stone that's carved with what appears to be a sorceress in a chair that resembles some of these charms. And then on the Oseberg ship, they found a chair that resembles some of these charms. And so I believe it's the only chair that has been found from the Viking Age. So it's kind of interesting that, is this a chair of prophecy or is this a throne that denotes like a royalty? Because I know in the Lewis chess set, the figures the royal figures, the king and queen are seated on similar kinds of chairs, similar to what was found on the Oseberg ship. So all of these things kind of relate together in some way. Why would there be a charm of a chair? I know they have charms of quite a few different
Yeah,
things.
I'm thinking these symbols might have also been perhaps intentionally ambiguous. Yes, the sort
Oh,
of problem of interpretation that we also have with the artifact, which is known as the Odin of Lyra, which also appears to represent either a Volva or
hmm,
Odin because of a little scratch on the
on
eye.
the eye.
But I think this might also have a little bit to do with us because we really want the ultimate interpretation and perhaps
Ah,
they weren't meant to be that clear. I mean, we are the ones
Mm.
obsessed with categories and classifications and having clear answers, but maybe they weren't that obsessed with that sort of thing. But it's interesting that you mentioned that because we actually have, I think, about 20 miniature chairs that have been
that's a
discovered
lot.
in graves, not a lot, but yeah, by the standards we have, yeah, that's a lot. Um, and as far as I know, their presence is sort of limited to the elite. So whatever the woman in Ossiberi was, she was definitely a part of the elite. And yeah, speaking of what we discussed earlier about whether the sorceresses were low status or high status, again, this is sort of like an argument that they were associated with the social elite. Um, we have a pendant chair in Firket 4, discussed about earlier, and we also have them in a couple of chamber graves from Birkam. And as far as I know, they were found near the waist, so they might have been carried in the pouch as well. And the chairs, in the case of the Birka burials, they were found alongside other types of pendants, alongside the coiled snake, which again might be a very relevant symbol uh, linked to sorcery, mythology, and so on. Um, I think there is also an interesting example from Hedeby, where we have a chair that features armrests shaped like wolves.
Oh,
And
yeah.
yeah, so that sort of these elements, they have a strong mythological connotation, and in the case of the Haitabo example, also might have a connotation of Odinic rites or Odinic connection. So, in this sense, I do think that the symbols might have been intentionally ambiguous because the Volva and Odin, they're sort of like related if you think about what they're doing. If you also consider the story in the Ynglinga saga about how Odin actually gained access to magical knowledge, which was through a woman, through Freya. So I think this is all connected in a way.
Very interesting.
Okay, so I know this is might sound really weird, but I was just thinking about like if 1,000 years from now, if there were archaeologists digging around in the United States and they came across those little Monopoly pieces, the little tokens that we go around the board with. Why are there so many little top hats? What did the top hat mean to society? Was it witchcraft or, like, or a little racing car or whatever? I don't know. It was just like I had just been looking in Neil Price's The Viking Way, not
Mhm.
just last week or the week before, and I was looking at the chair pendants. And so and they look like the Monopoly tokens.
They
So
do.
A
Well,
little
some of
bit.
them have like it looks like flowers on them as well, which I thought
yeah,
was
yeah,
really
some kind of
interesting.
design. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, I think some of them are box shaped and some of them are barrel shaped. I think that's the
Hmm.
And
usual archaeological
some of them
classification.
are
Yeah.
maybe carved from a single tree trunk, a cub chair. I was researching that.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
they
yeah,
still
exactly.
apparently in some areas of Scandinavia they were existed right into the 20th century. They were around. I mean, I would think they would last a long time.
Yeah, it would be kind of boring to just interpret it as a mundane piece of
I
piece of
know. No,
miniature
we can't have
furniture.
that.
I mean, I
As a
refuse
game.
to do that. I want it to be a ritual platform.
Me
Yeah.
too. Well, and that kind of speaks to what you were talking about earlier about going from the archaeology and looking at the sagas and or back and forth, like just almost like confirming a bias or something. Like, I want this to be a ritual thing, so we might look for it in that way when maybe it's just a piece from a game, or like. So I can see
Yeah,
the
which is
the
why
the
I think
problems
it's
in doing
important
that.
in yeah, exactly. Which is why I think it's important if to look at the whole assemblage, like the whole archaeological
Hmm.
context, and to sort of like figure out what kind of identity that person could have had, or at least what sort of identity the community who buried her wanted to ascribe to her. So it's really a matter of not just the object, but like the whole assemblage of objects, like the whole material story that they're trying to narrate, and the material citations that they're using.
Yeah, we hear about high seats, for example, but we don't really know what the high seat was. We don't know if they were chairs or if they were just a raised bench. Just
Might have
no
been a
idea
raised
exactly.
bench, might have been a raised platform. We also have a couple of references in the saga about throwing, the pillars of these chairs and then
Mm.
going with the flow and settling Iceland at some point. They do seem, if we look at the whole evidence, they do seem to have had some sort of ritualistic importance as well. But yet the shape of it is kind of like difficult to make out, as you said, probably just some sort of raised platform. Hlidskjalfið, Odin's chair to foresee the
Hmm.
world, can draw a connection
Hmm.
there as well.
Well, and then the platforms that the vulvas used, which was, they were
Yeah,
raised
might have been
platforms
an
as well.
imitation of Hlidskjalf as well.
Hmm.
Yeah, to see over the world in a way. to draw this connection to other worlds, hidden worlds.
So interesting.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh. So is there anything else that I'm sure, well, there's a lot
We
we
could go
could,
on and on.
but I want to
Definitely.
respect your time. It's been about an hour, so, and I know it's probably getting late where you are. We're still early here um, in the West where Johanna
Mhm.
and I are. So, anything else you wanted to bring up that we didn't cover?
Um, yeah, maybe just that there are more examples of sorceresses that are worth looking at in the sagas. I mean, yeah, both in the family sagas and in the legendary sagas. Like there is, for example, this very interesting case of the trollish glance and a very grotesque ritual that you can read in Vatsdøla saga, for example, where you have this woman called Ljot, and she's portrayed as a malevolent witch mother. She's portrayed as being very uncanny. She seems to have arrived in Iceland from Norway with her son, and she's generally very unpleasant and unpopular. And throughout the saga, her role is defined by the attempt to use sorcery called Fjolkini, which is a very interesting word because it essentially means knowledge of a lot of things. So in this way, sorcery is definitely linked to knowledge in this term. But she doesn't really use it in a positive way, in the sense that her son murders his benefactor, and she she essentially tries to protect her son and tells the community that they are going to soon discover who is more powerful and which is more powerful in the community. Is it Luck, which is Hamingja, or is it Ingimund's, that would be the benefactor, Ingimund's sons? And will she be able to be defeated? And she sets up a direct confrontation between something that would represent like the social order. Um, Ingimund's sons would represent the social order, and Ljot and her son would represent this sort of like subversive occult force. And she performs a grotesque inverted magic ritual, in the sense that she pulls her clothes over her head and walks backwards with her head between her legs, and she
That's right.
peers out of her own posterior, or something like that. And it's an interesting parallel to what we discussed earlier about that case where you place the head of the revenant between the buttocks. So might have been a magical connotation there. And I think that's also a sort of like interesting example to notice that these trollish women are used in saga narratives in order um, to highlight the fact that they signify a challenge to the natural order and also a challenge to the social order, and to turn the landscape upside down in a way.
Mm.
So who wins?
Well, she doesn't win,
Okay.
but she fails because she's too slow apparently, and she is spotted before her magic can take full effect. But
Mm.
yeah, like I said, it's an interesting episode of a character who again seems to be very subversive, and the author uses this episode in order to show us the confrontation between the natural and the supernatural, between the normal and the paranormal in a way.
Mm.
Or between the Christian and the heathen as well.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. These
Mhm.
tensions in society. Yeah.
Yeah, fairy tales pull that in a lot too.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
They do.
Mhm.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, it makes you kind of wonder also in some cases how old these stories really are. Like
Mm.
we were talking about, the burial that in Denmark that resembled the story of Katla, which was an Icelandic tale. But how old was
Hmm.
that story really? Did it really originate much further back?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, most of the sagas were written in the 13th, 14th century. I think that there are some pagan remnants. I think that some of the Icelandic authors, they were aware of pagan cemeteries, they were definitely aware of burial mounds. but they would have been aware of this and that, what their pagan ancestors used to do, but they sort of like threw it all in this mix of history and myth and legend in the attempt to, on the one hand, find a place for their pagan ancestors, and on the other hand, to use these pagan topics as a way of defining their own world. So yeah, some of these elements, I think they would have been remnants of ancient times, but they were framed in a way that distorts them, sometimes quite a lot. So we're basically left with just bits and pieces put together in new ways, creating different things and different stories of myth and magic and so on, which are nevertheless very interesting, as you said, to notice all these tensions that exist in society and so on.
Well, there's also medieval stories, early medieval stories of wizards' duels between the local witch and the priest.
Yeah.
Um, and
Mhm.
and where they're both using magic and trying to outdo each other. And of course, the priest always wins, but uh, and that is also true in early Irish tales as well, early Christian Irish tales, trying to
Yeah, there
show.
is now you reminded me of Barton saga, where you have there is this episode with entering a burial mound where it is suggested by how was it? It was suggested by the king for the hero to take a priest with him, but he wanted a sorcerer. And then eventually it turns out that the priest was the one who managed to help him enter this burial mound, not the magician. Again.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm
yeah.
not familiar with that one. So, and I know there is also a story, I don't remember too much about it, but about um, a local witch who knits the priest a sweater and sends it to him, and it makes him itch all over. And then he sends her back a
Hmm.
gift that's even worse. And I don't remember exactly. I just remember reading it somewhere. So, like, okay.
All right.
Yeah, they
That
often have a
was
motivation for revenge. But
she. Yeah.
you can also find motivations for doing good. I mean, serving as a benefactor to the hero. I think I mentioned before, we feel in the saga of Hrolf Kraki. The saga of Hrolf Kraki also has a very, very strong female character, which is the sorceress of
Cool.
Skuld. Speaking of the name of my channel, which
Mhm.
also Skuld. Yeah,
And
Yes.
she was
The
his half
YouTube channel.
sister. She was his half
yeah.
sister, right?
She was his half sister, yeah, that is correct. And I really like the end of the saga where she conjures up all she can, like from trolls to revenants to sorceress, and all these characters in order to defeat Hrolf Kraki. But I was actually thinking about a different character from the saga of Bossi and Heraud, where we have Busla, who is a foster mother, and she's very interesting because she can actually use runic magic, and she uses runic magic and trickery to save her foster son from the king who trapped him. And again, she incites all kinds of beings like trolls and elves and frost giants using runes. And um, the ultimate curse actually consists in this riddle where the king must utter the names of 6 warriors, and failure would result in his soul sinking into punishment or something like that. Anyway, it's something very complicated. And this again probably draws from some sort of oral tradition. I mean, runes, they were still used until very late in Norway, in Bergen, for example. Um, but in the saga, it appears like they do have this connotation of, these very powerful magical things that you could use. There is also a runic curse in Grettis saga at the end. But at any rate, this
Mm.
character of Busla, she supports the main hero, and she supports him until the end, until the peak in the final battle. She also uses shape shifting, and I think she transforms into some sort of monstrous dog to engage in lethal combat. against some supernatural forces. So yeah, she also represents this paranormal, magical, supernatural, marginal world the authors really struggle with to integrate in the written Christian medium. And in the case of the more legendary sagas, we can definitely see that they're really try to augment it. Like they're engaging more and more elements, and it also has this like connotation of sheer entertainment to it, which is why they're sometimes
Sure.
called the lying sagas. Like just strictly for entertainment. We're not trying to make anything out of it. So yeah,
Which saga was the one with Busla? I don't know if I've ever read that.
The saga of Bossi and Herod.
Oh,
Bossy and
Yeah,
Harold.
yeah.
I don't think I've ever read that one.
Me neither.
Well, you
Writing
should.
it
It's
down.
very funny.
It sounds
It's also
great.
very
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sounds right up my alley. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
it also has one of the very few explicit sexual episodes in saga literature. So,
oh,
but
Wow.
it's expressed like in a very funny way. It's essentially, I'm not going to spoil it, but it's essentially Bossy, the hero, visiting a farmer's daughter, and he tries to, have intercourse with her, but he expresses it like a sort of poem with a lot of puns and metaphors, and it's very funny. So,
oh, like a Shakespeare play.
Yeah.
yeah, more or less.
That sounds fun.
Yeah,
Sounds really fun.
yeah.
All right, I have to look that up.
Yeah, there's actually, quite a few sagas that I have not even heard of, and I know they're out there,
Same.
but they're
Yeah,
just a little more
Yeah,
obscure.
definitely.
Some
Yeah.
of which maybe haven't even been translated.
it's
I
possible.
think most of them have been translated. The problem is that some of them have old translations,
Mm.
or translations that are
Mhm.
hard to find. But in
Yeah.
Yeah,
any
I
case,
can imagine.
yeah,
More
Well,
to
that was
explore.
great. Yeah.
Yeah.
much more to explore. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
very, very rich and diverse world. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and you explore a lot of things on your podcast, the Shield of Skuld, right?
The YouTube channel.
Right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes. Well, do you
Yeah.
want to tell the listeners where? So you can be found on YouTube as,
Yeah.
is it just Scold or is it the Shield of
Yeah, my
Scold?
project, so the handle is Shield of Skuld,
Okay.
and it's both a YouTube channel and a Substack now,
Oh, okay.
although that's still under development. But yeah, I would actually like to write more in the future. I intend to
Mhm.
write more in the future. And
Nice.
I am interested both in the Icelandic sagas and in Viking archaeology. I mean, lately, I think one of the most interesting aspects, I think, would be the representations of material culture in the Icelandic sagas. Be something
Mm.
very interesting to investigate. So not only the stories, but also like the material objects, for example, the topic of magic swords or magical
Oh,
Mhm.
objects in general. Because I think even if yeah, they seem to be like, only these objects that pop up when heroes need them and they have some sort of curse attached to him, like the sword of Tyrfing and so on. I think it's a little more to them than that. I think we can link them, for example, to these new theories regarding new materialism and post-humanism, which basically state that we should overcome this very strict differentiation between the human and the non-human, and between the material and the immaterial. In order to like challenge our own views, and this might give us a little bit of inspiration as to how to go about that sort of topic, like how to interpret archaeological material as well, like stop seeing objects as sheer objects, but try to see them as more integrated into the individuality and the personality of the people who were with these objects, which from a contemporary point of view kind of makes sense if we think about our complete dependence on the smartphone. I mean, people in the future will definitely write about this. I mean, I think it's already been written, but yeah.
well, that would be very interesting to have you back to talk about that. So
Yeah, I
let
would.
us
Yeah.
know when
Yeah,
you
I
when
would
you
love to.
that
Yep,
would be
Yeah.
yep,
great. That's a great topic.
Yeah,
So
yep.
interested in
absolutely.
it.
Yeah.
So keep in touch with us and let it. Well, we do follow your YouTube
Absolutely.
channel.
We do
so-
follow you. And I
Absolutely.
follow you on
Yep.
Substack
Yep.
too.
Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
and I will look into your Substack as well. So
Yeah.
Yep. Very happy
So.
to hear. Yep.
Yeah. Good. Well, thank you so much for coming on and chatting with us.
Likewise, it was so
wonderful.
nice. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening. You can find Johanna at johannawittenberg.com, where you'll find a free short story, a prequel to her Norse Queen series. And you can find me, K.S., at ksbarton.com, where you can also find a free short story from me, a prequel to my Norse family series. See you next time.